Happy New Year, everyone, and happy one-year anniversary to us here on Beside the Gavel. It's been a great year, and in fact, we've surprised a lot of people by not getting canceled yet. So if you bet the over, good job. This year, we've really tried to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on the township and let people in to see kind of how things operate. We've interviewed commissioners, staff members, others in the community to allow people to have a better look at how the township works, what we have in store, answer some of those key questions on really what makes us tick, and why we're so unique here in Lower Merion. There's no one better to ask those questions of than this month's guest, President of the Board of Commissioners, Todd Sinai. Todd, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Andy.
So, and you're actually the first two-time guest on Beside the Gavel, and the reason is because you're the most requested guest we've had. So, Susan, you can really stop sending in those requests because just one vote was enough to make you the most requested guest. But seriously, to all you viewers out there, if there's anyone you want to see interviewed on Beside the Gavel, if there's anything you want us to talk about, please write in. The email address, I'm sure the goons put up on the screen, so you can write into that and let us know what you want to hear. And a little trivia, do you know why this is called Beside the Gavel and not Behind the Gavel?
Why don't you tell me, Andy?
Well, this used to be the president of the board's show. And the president has decided to shirk his responsibility and pass it off to the vice president of the board, which is me. And since I am beside the gavel, so thank you for the honor of getting to host this show.
So instead of the word shirking, I like to say delegate, empower, right? Signs of strong leadership.
There you go.
Okay.
And hey, what are vice presidents for? When I first had you on the show, you were just sworn in as president of the board. You're now a grizzled veteran. Tell us, what's the year been like?
It's been busy. I mean, it's been a strong learning curve, or a steep learning curve, I should say. Grizzled is not a word that people used to use with me, and still, they tend to call me less kind things, but it's certainly, I have a few more gray hairs, but mostly, it's just appreciation of just how terrific the staff and our fellow commissioners are, and just how fortunate we are in this township to have this crew working on behalf of the township.
Yeah. So what's the difference between serving as commissioner and then serving as the president of the board? How does that differ? Like, what's different in your responsibilities and in what it looks like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as commissioner, you're really spending a lot of time just attending to your ward, and as president of the board, you're spending more of your time just making sure the board functions well, right? So I still have the same agenda, views, interests I had when I was just ward commissioner, but now I'm one of 14, but I'm responsible for bringing all 14 together and making sure all 14 are heard and all 14's views are brought together. And it's a combination of balancing that and figuring out what's the best use of the township's resources to achieve the board's agenda. And I think of it as our collective agenda.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I know I certainly appreciate about working with you is that you don't view this as I am the president of the board, this is my direction for the board. Yeah, it's you are really that leader of us and getting us as a board to have our collective policies and what we want to do.
Yeah, no, one of the good fortunes that we have of having just 14, or excluding myself, 13 terrific commissioners, is that really all what I view as a success would be channeling the will of the board and actually effectuating it.
Yeah. So, tell me, what? I'll ask it
you are
this
not
way.
usually
I will
speechless.
Ask it. No, I'll ask it this way.
I want to. Wasn't it? It's a big word.
You always do that to me. You always use big words, and you gotta stop it. But okay, I'll put you back on the spot. Are you glad you ran for? You know what? I'm not even going to ask. I'm going to ask you an easier question. Okay. How great's your vice president been?
So which vice president? What vice president? I see the guy on TV. He's never actually there.
All right, we'll just move on. So during your first year, what are some of your biggest accomplishments? What are some things you've been really proud of over the past year as president?
Yeah, so great question. I think the first year was learning how to do the job, And I think the first year, a lot of it was setting the foundation for a successful second year. But the number one thing that I don't want to say you and I tried to accomplish was to be able to communicate what the board wanted to accomplish in terms of policy in a way that would give clear direction to township management on what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so that really meant finding a way for us to collectively have a meeting of the minds before we actually had any specific details of policies. Like an agreement of let's think of what it is that we want to consider working on. Right. And that sounds like horribly bureaucratic, right? It's like, okay, let's plan to make a plan.
Right.
Is awful, but it's important because what we do in the township is or what we should do is that we as commissioners should give collective direction to township management of like, here's our broad objectives, our high level objectives, our goals for the township, what our vision is, and we should ask the township management and therefore the staff to deliver us ideas and policies in ways to actually accomplish those things, and then evaluate those. And that is a process that one has to start early. And but when you do it, then I think it makes everyone's lives easier, right? When we go to evaluate the policy, we've already kind of agreed on that we're interested in it. And for the people working the township, they have a sense of this is what we should be working on, and B, if we work on this, like it'll actually be considered. Yeah. Right.
And I think it also, another thing it does, it kind of sharpens the pencil for what our role should be versus what the staff's role, right? Because we have a tendency, you have really smart people, hard workers on the board who got into this because they want to be involved with the township. When there's an issue that's, really juicy and something somebody likes, they really want to dig in. Mm-hmm. But our job is not to do that, right? Our job is to set policy, and we have this incredible staff to go out and do that work. So I think by kind of creating that focus for us, it allows us to do that better and allows us to do our jobs. And if we're doing our jobs and not stepping on the toes of staff, it allows them to do their jobs better as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one perfect example of this is something you implemented this year, which was kind of having this priorities workshop, which we did, I think, in June, maybe July. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that. What led up to that? What's that idea about?
Yeah, that we were trying to find a way to get the board to distill the many possible things we would like to work on, right? So I tend to think of this as if we were to come up with a list of all the things we were interested in, that might be the 10-year plan, right? Right. And like, we're not going to do 10 years of plan in the first year, and like, even if we took 1/10 of the 10-year plan, it would probably be 10 years itself. Right. and so how do we get the board to focus on like the set of things that were the most immediate priorities? And so the way the board is organized is that the commissioners are chairs of various committees that work on topics, whether it's sustainability or parks and recreation or libraries or police. And so the committee chairs were tasked with working with their committees and with township staff to come up with really 3 ideas. And I encourage the committee chairs to have some be like immediate things we can just get done, right? And some being sort of longer lead time, maybe bigger agendas or more amorphous kinds of things to try and accomplish. Like, let's figure out what we want to work on. Let's work on that, right? And everyone brought that to the board, and we had a meeting where people presented what came out of their committees. Yep. And then it went to the board, the commissioners, to say, okay, well, we did this offline. This was your idea. It's a terrific idea. To have the commissioners offline effectively rank what they heard and say, what are the handful of things that they think is like most important to them, and then the next tier, and then the next tier. Yeah. And from that, we came up with a short list. And I think the remarkable thing was that there was unbelievable uniformity. Right? Yeah. Like this board, like 14 people, like the top things of value were the top. Yeah. Right. And like that was terrific, because we were able to go to the township management and say, look, the board collectively, like enthusiastically wants to work on these things. Yeah. So those are the priorities.
Yeah. And some of those were affordable housing, our trail, improving our trails. I'm trying to think what some of the others were.
There were some parks and recreation amenities, like
right. Amenities was a big. Yep.
Yep. There was additional traffic calming. There was a lot of economic and streetscape development in our downtowns, and trying to turn those into vibrant communities.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, those were all.
Yeah. And some of it also enforcement, right? Enforcement of our policies, which in last month's episode, I talked to Commissioner Zelov about the budget for 2023, and one of the big changes is we have new enforcement officers, right? We don't typically add a lot of people to our staff on a year-to-year basis, and I think in the 2023 budget, it's five new full-time employees, including enforcement in both parking regulations and in inspections. Yeah. And that came directly out of that workshop. So I think that's important. Yeah.
And I think the board direction is leading to already is leading to things to seeing influence. You mentioned those people have been hired for enforcement. Our capital plan has money in it for a splash pad at a playground, or at least investigating that. And it's also hopefully empowering our staff to the department chairs or department heads to come up and blue sky good ideas for us, right? Within the stuff that we said is important. Tell us how we should accomplish that, and what do you see as best practices across our communities.
Definitely. So as usual, Todd, you're more long-winded than I expected. So we didn't get to cover everything I wanted to cover in the first half, but lucky for us, we get to come back after this break, and continue the conversation with President Todd Sinai. Thanks to our sponsors, the Lower Merion Public Works Department and Ivory Soap, we have enough money to film the second half of Beside the Gavel. I'm still here with Todd Sinai, and we're talking about 2023 priorities. So let's jump right into it, Todd. It's a whole new year. What are we going to see in 2023? Are we going to finally get that casino you've always wanted in Lower Merion?
It is in the budget. We're looking for exactly the site. I think we have some fields that maybe we can convert into it.
Note for all your viewers, that is not actually in the budget. No, in all seriousness, for 2023, what do you expect? What do you hope to see, for the year in this township?
I think we have a number of initiatives that we kind of kicked into gear at the end of 2022 that we will hopefully get some traction on this year, right? So some of it is implementing some of the sustainability plan. Mm-hmm. Some of it is actually starting to build the things that were in our capital plan. The trail improvements, all these things that we listed as priorities for 2022 were really there to be kicked in 2023. We have an Ardmore Avenue Community Center, which is a large capital project. We have a large amount of American Rescue Plan funds. Right. That this is the year where we will be deciding how to allocate those. And so that's already a lot of work. Yeah. In addition, we need to start rolling on coming up with priorities for the following year. And in the spirit of this is a board effort, not a president effort, what we should be doing is, or what we will be doing, is hearing from our fellow commissioners what the next set of priorities should be, and going through the same process again a little earlier this year. Yeah. To figure out what our collective next set of priorities are. I think
it's a really interesting point, because typically you say, okay, it's January, it's time for New Year's resolutions, it's time for here's what we're going to do this year. But really, we're not setting our 2023 priorities in January of 2023. We're setting them with our 2022 budget, or our budget that we pass in 2022 for 2023. That's what sets our priorities. So really, when we talk about what are our priorities when we do this workshop again in hopefully the spring of 2023, it's really for 2024. We're already baked in 2023.
That's right. I mean, to a degree, any priorities that are legislative, one of the things that came out of sustainability is plastic bag ordinance, right? Yeah. So legislative things we could do in the same year. Sure. Anything that requires funding is really a year ahead. Yeah. And the point of setting our priorities early in the year is to give staff time to actually flesh out what a budget and cost would be and if are there staffing implications, any of those things for the board's priorities, so we can actually make a decision of, okay, we've decided that we're interested in it. Now that we've costed it out, do we want to go forward?
Right, right. And I think the other important point you brought up is that it's not your priorities, it's the board's priorities. You are but one of 14 votes. And yeah, as a board, we need to, and I think
my job is to organize, right?
Yeah.
It's to just help us function well.
And I think we're better because of it, right? Because we have 14 voices, we have different opinions, we have different priorities, we have different policies we all want to see. That makes us better, right? It's that diversity of opinion, whatever you're talking about, whether it was in school, whether it's in my jobs, whether it's doing this. It's always been when you have different people with different opinions, different backgrounds, bringing their own, and I'll say their own baggage, but in a positive way, their own history into a decision, into a project, you're going to end up being so much better as a collective than if it's one person or a group of people who think exactly the same way, and you get your group think, and it's like, this is how we're doing it. So I think that's an important point that you bring up.
Yeah, I think one of the board brings a lot of different perspectives, and I agree that you get better decisions when you listen to each other. And there's a reason that there's a number of us on the board that we're set up that way. I think it's much better than an autocracy, right?
Yes.
And the other thing that has been surprising to me is that our wards, we're working for the township, but we're also representing our ward. Our wards are very disparate across the township. And you can imagine people having very different perspectives on issues. So the fact that there was so much common ground and what our priorities should be was I was thrilled, because I think I perceive the township to be more different across it than it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, the geography might look different, but I think when people identify themselves, the fact that we are all part of Lower Merion, we all, there are reasons we all live here, whether you live in Wynwood or Ballackinwood or Villanova or Gladwin, right? It doesn't matter. We are all part of that same township, and I think you're right, we do, and this showed it, that we do have a collective vision for what we want to see for our township.
Yeah. So I think we all appreciate the excellence of our township.
Yeah.
And the qualities it has, and we're really interested in sort of building on those.
Yeah, definitely. So, but let's look at your ward for a little bit, because I do have you here. Tell me a little bit about your ward. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the big things you're working on locally as well?
Okay. So I'm going to start with a semantic thing, which is it's not my ward, it's the ward I represent. Right?
Fair enough.
And I take that seriously.
Yes.
And there's several things I hear from the residents of Merion, Ward 12, which is the ward I represent. The sidewalks or some way of safe transportation. We are in a part of township where we're relatively dense, but old enough that not everywhere has sidewalks. And like many parts of the township, it has transitioned from people who have lived here 30 years moving out of their houses and new families moving in.
Right.
And new families have kids. That's one reason that people move to the suburbs. And people with kids want sidewalks. And also, just demographically, the generation that is coming in, moving into Lower Merion now, is a generation that inherently values walkability. And so finding ways to, in Ward 12, bridge the gaps in our sidewalk network to make it so you can walk to the elementary school, walk to the park, and not be run over on East Wynwood Road, because we have a fair amount of traffic that comes through, is important. The second thing I hear a lot is sustainability, climate, and especially trees and tree canopy. Yes. The older parts of the township have wonderful, majestic trees that were planted when our houses were built, which is, my house was built in 1906, and we have 100-year-old trees on our property, and they are beautiful, but like houses that need to get replaced, the trees start to come down. And finding ways to preserve and invest in, have new ones to replace them that maintain the same value is, the same value of in quality of the area is important to the Ward 12 residents.
No doubt, and I think it is to the whole township. And it's interesting that you brought up the trees. recently, the synagogue I'm at Temple Beth Hillel Bethel in Wynwood, we just installed our third rabbi in 65 years.
Okay.
So it's big, big new change in the synagogue. And as we had the ceremony, he talked a lot about trees, and he told a story which I'm completely going to botch, but he told a story about an old man who, was going along and planting these trees. And he was, 70, 75 years old, and they were fruit trees, and he looked like he was hungry. And so somebody came up to him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm planting these fruit trees." And he's like, "Clearly, this isn't going to help you. Why are you doing this?" And he said, "I'm planting them for the next generation." And he's like, "But you need help, clearly." And he said, "Well, I got my help from the previous generation.
Yeah.
We need to continually do that, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation." So I am far from a rabbi. I did not tell that story with nearly as well as he did. But the idea is that and I think everyone on our board shares that vision of always, we're looking out for that next generation, and sustainability and planting trees and taking care of our environment is so important to all of us on this board.
It goes beyond just the environment, right? Because I think one of the things that you see in our zoning code and how we treat buildings, that we appreciate that the housing stock and the built environment here outlives us. It outlives we are temporary inhabitants of it, right?
Yeah.
And this township predated us and is going to outlast us.
Yes.
And we are mere stewards for the period that we are here.
Right.
And we even see that in our budget, right? And because what we do in our budget is we actually reserve money to reinvest in the parts of the township that are depreciating, right? Whereas many communities don't do that. They just whenever it needs it, if they have the budget, then they'll do it. But in effect, they eat their capital in a way that we, budget-wise, have the discipline not to do.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like you are an economics professor or something.
Yeah, it might be.
Wait, what? He is? It turns out you are an economics professor of real estate, right? Of real estate economics.
Yeah.
So
economics and finance. Yeah.
I was close.
Yeah.
At a little local school. So one question we always ask is about development, right? We've seen this torrid pace of development. We don't have much time left, but quickly, is this going to continue? What do you expect to see? What should we do in your mind?
Yeah, so a couple questions there. So do I think it's going to continue? No, I think it's going to taper off. I think we had a confluence of events that led to a wave of development. One is that development comes in waves. We had a wave in the 1970s, we had a wave in the 1990s, we have a wave now. Everywhere has had a wave because the prices are high enough to support it, and everyone recognizes that you kind of get in while you can.
Right.
The second is that one of the things that you and I voted for when we were commissioners before I was president was a reduction in the ability to build. And so we had a number of projects that kind of got grandfathered in, and they were reaching the end of their runway. So that wave has cleared out. It's really tapered off. I don't think we're going to see a continuation of it. I will say there is good development in my book, and there's not so good development. Good development is development that is accretive to the entire township, not just to whoever's doing the development, right? That is, finds a way to provide a benefit outside of itself. Right? The development I don't like is the one that's just there for personal financial gain. Yeah. I want there to be a public benefit to it.
Yeah. I think I'm with you, except for once again you used one of those big words, accretive. I think it was accretive.
It's a finance word. You have an MBA. You know what it means.
Todd, I've put you on the spot a lot. I've needled you a lot. I hope you're willing to be our first 3-time guest next January and talk about the 2024 plan. But thank you very much for joining us. And for everyone who's been watching, thank you very much for joining us with Beside the Gavel, and we'll see you next month.